The market changes and the world changes. So the more outside and holistic, fresh perspective you can have to go in and design that role and the profile, I think that can be an advantage.
Once you've hired somebody, how do you make them successful?
Working with them on constructing their own plan and holding them accountable.
One thing I do is I write a lot and publish on LinkedIn of like how I manage. They understand me as a hiring manager, right? And so they're gonna know if they want to work for me or not. And I think I found a lot of that I think helps with my employer brand. Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior go-to-market leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow new talent. Today, I'm joined by Tim Dorris, Chief Revenue Officer at Stensul. Tim and I connected through Go-to-Market Fund, where we're both LPs, and I think we both found that we geek out a lot on email. And so Tim is a top-notch CRO who I've traded a lot of thoughts with over the years, has a lot of experience in scaling sales orgs. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Happy to be here.
That's awesome. Well, you've led all of GTM, I guess, at Stensul for the last 6 years. You probably hired a lot of go-to-market leaders for your team. Is there a lesson out there on hiring exec talent that's really stayed true for you, even as the playbook has changed?
Yeah. So I run all of the revenue side, so all of GTM minus marketing.
Yep.
Are the things that have stayed true. Finding good talent is hard to come by. There's a lot of people who have done the scope or have the title or have the role. Just like any other individual contributor or manager role, there's just such a big difference in the top decile, that top 10% that you're really looking for building out your executive team, and finding and getting the attention of those folks is extremely hard. So I'd say that's definitely stayed true.
I couldn't agree more. Every one of us is trying to hire the top 10%, right? Which is makes it really hard for the bottom 90, for sure. Well, maybe let's kick it off with talking about like when you know there's a new exec role needed on your team. How do you go about like structuring the role, getting people aligned, and just kind of designing that role?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, a lot of people jump to the job description. And sort of sketching. Maybe they're using ChatGPT to make that easier. But I think really sitting down and understanding the outcomes that you're looking for that person to undertake and lead and deliver. And we turn those outcomes into a scorecard. I think that's such a critical step in the building of the profile. And that shouldn't be done in a silo. You should be doing that 360. So what are, Noah as my founder CEO, what are his inputs on his point of view of that role, your people leaders, the direct reports of that team, 360, how can you collaborate on what are the outcomes you're looking to see? And obviously you as the exec, the hiring manager are going to have the strongest point of view there. But turning outcomes into a scorecard, I think, is a critical first step.
We were talking before we started the recording on just the idea of, do you have a role fully designed in your mind up front, or do you like to kind of see some candidates early on, assess and refine together? Like, how do you go through that process?
Yeah, I probably have done a bit of both, depending on what the role is and how many times I've hired for that role before at a certain stage. And then other times it's definitely shaped by, hey, before I launch this, I'm going to go speak to some people in the market who do that role or have hired for that role. What have they learned? What are they experiencing? What are they seeing in the market to help provide that input? So I probably err a little bit more on the latter of gathering those data points, because the market changes and the world changes. So the more outside and holistic, fresh perspective you can have to go in and design that role and the profile, I think that can be an advantage.
That's great. Well, maybe once you've got a role in mind, like how do you go about finding that? Do you post it? Do you hire a recruiter? Do you work with your VCs? How do you think about that?
All the above. I think posting the role is going to give it visibility. It's going to know for the broader market, this is for sure being hired. It's a budgeted role. In some cases, I probably start without an outside recruiter just to see, what does our inbound flow look like? What can we do through networks of our current leadership team, of our board, of our VCs and then kind of test the market a little bit with what's the volume, what's the quality look like before we then go work with an external recruiter. But for a lot of exec roles, it's hard to do just organically. You can kind of get lucky with a referral there, but working with a recruiter is generally been a good move for a lot of the leadership positions I've hired for.
I've seen in this market, like you post something and you can get 2,000 applicants, especially when AI can write those applications. Does your recruiting team curse you when you post them up front? I see a lot of companies increasingly not post senior roles and try to hire them through every channel but posting out loud.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that may be something that's evolving, and probably forays perfectly into why you started Whispered and what you guys are up to there. For us, I don't think we've pivoted away from posting. It's just sort of the known quantity of sorting through the masses and the volume, and what is our strategy to deal with that volume, and is there an AI play that we're using to scan resumes and sort of feed through that? But I don't think that's something we've altered yet fully in terms of completely going dark while we're recruiting for a role.
No, I respect it. It's funny. Like I think there's such a balance to how to do that. How does somebody get on your radar, right? Like, say you're a hiring manager of somebody. Like, what's successful, what works, and especially like, are people backdooring or are they coming to the front door? Or maybe if you have like a recent great hire, do you know how that person got kind of in front of you?
Yeah, I'm working with the either internal recruiter or external recruiter on the screen for a very few concise things that I'm looking for, that going back to the scorecard and going back to the outcomes that I'm looking to screen on before they pass to me as a first interviewer of the sort of hiring team outside of the recruiter. But before that, if somebody's sending me a note, finds my email, messages me on LinkedIn, and makes a connection that way through a third party backdoor, whatever that may be, that's definitely going to stand out. And I think people underutilize or struggle to know how to use that effectively. And so that shouldn't feel like an outbound prospecting campaign. It should feel like something a lot softer touch and a lot more, coming through a recommendation, finding a way to get to me through somebody else is definitely a leg up in the interview process there.
I couldn't agree more. It's like I talk with a lot of my friends. Like, I read every one of those people that figures out how to break through, especially if you're a sales leader, you want people that can break through. Any memories of anybody that did do something exceptional that kind of got to you on that side?
We might have to come back to that. Let me give that some thought.
That's totally okay. What was I going to say? Like, when do you engage with people in the interview process? Like, are you if say you're the hiring manager, like, are you first screen? Are you later on in the process? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I'm the first one after the recruiter. So whether that's an internal, external recruiter, I take that next call following the screen. The reason I want to position myself early, I have the closest sense of what I'm looking for. It allows me to have a direct feedback loop to the recruiting team on what we're screening for. And I'm then making sure I'm not wasting or expending my team's time on interviewing and going down rabbit holes or paths that I don't think are wise to pursue. So just a way to keep that feedback loop tight, I sort of bookend myself. I'm there at the beginning of the process. I'm throughout other stages, and then I'm heavily involved at the end of the process as well.
So, that makes sense. I think a lot of candidates always wonder if I never see the other end of the bookend, right? Like they're always sitting there being like, how do I make it all the way through there? So we talked early on about the 10%, right? The top 10%. Like, how are you evaluating for that? Like, I'm fascinated to hear, like, what are you looking for? Do you have a favorite interview question?
I think the outcomes is such a crucial thing to keep revisiting. What is their track record against the outcomes that you're looking to deliver? And that's sort of the more like harder evidence or experience for the role. And then I'm constantly screening on the softer traits, the characteristics, which evolve a little bit based on the company and the culture. But generally, you got to hire somebody that's smart, that's articulate, that's curious. I do want executives that are coachable and moldable and not just going to do the exact same thing they did at the last place.
Yes.
And then the drive, the hunger, the fire. I'm constantly evaluating for those like 5 or so characteristics. And then depending on the company, I think your culture has a slightly different shape to it that you want to make sure they're a culture add at your company where they are. And so there's going to be some questions. And that's where I often bring in other people in the interview process to evaluate those things, whether that's a team member that would be reporting to them or a peer to judge those things. What's an important thing to think about is, are you hiring someone who's done this exact job before, or are you hiring somebody that you're willing to take a bet on that's stepping up to the next stage? So they've been a director of customer success, you're hiring for a VP of customer success, like whatever that may look like. And I think the important thing, just to pull on that thread for a minute, to screen for, all right, you're probably going to be going from managing individual contributors to managing managers. You're going to be going from executing mostly on a book of business or a territory or whatever region, whatever that may be, to a lot more cross-functional projects and initiatives. And so you really want to test for the ability to step into those things. What would be different? What do they perceive to be different? How do they adapt to the evolution of those new responsibilities? And find examples of where that worked out and where it didn't. And are they continue to learn and evolve and sort of positioning themselves to step up to the greater responsibility? On the flip side, if you're talking to somebody and your profile is more been there, done that experience, I'm really drilling in on what's the motivation to go do the same thing again? Like, where's that fire? Where's the drive come from? Two, I think at the stage of companies that I work with, and Stensul certainly is in that, like, we're not an early stage startup anymore. We're more that growth scale stage, but there's still a need for, across all the leadership team, across all roles, to be very hands-on, to like roll up the sleeves and be in there with customers, with deals, with initiatives. And so you're screening for the drive, you're screening for the ability to step in and be able to kind of do things as individuals versus pure delegation. So those are a couple examples of things I would drill into based on what profile I'm screening against or I'm hiring for. Because generally I'm open to both in most cases. I would keep my eyes open for both ends of the spectrum. And then it's just a matter of, how do they do against that criteria that you're evaluating against?
I love that. What you said, though, is like not looking for people to do this, to run the same playbook, definitely echoes with me, right? Like, it's like, I feel like when you've gone from the first success you've had to your second one, then you're just like, cool, let me run that same playbook again. I think when you've kind of had that playbook smacked in the face, then you're like, okay, I know the frameworks, but I'm going to figure it out. Right. And I remember I was interviewing somebody one time and they said, I have the maturity to know what frameworks to look at, but I'm also smart enough not to just go run the same thing again. And I deeply believe that. Like, every company's GTM motion is different on that. Do you have any ways, like interview questions or ways that you test for this stuff? I mean, I'm really impressed with how thoughtful the criteria you're looking and well articulated the criteria you have are, but are there any ways you found to test for this stuff?
There's always a test or presentation or some step that's a small group. And I'm generally pulling from like, what is a deliverable that I know is going to be required of this person in this seat over the next 3 to 6 months or whatever that time frame may be. So for example, my SVP of CS is in the process of hiring a director of professional services. And so what they're testing for is, hey, we're about to launch and package together a bunch of new service offerings. Like, they're testing for their experience doing that. And then the presentation section is, hey, based on what you've now collected and understood about Stensul and our business and our customers and our needs, how would you go about this? Like, how do you think about the pricing, the packaging, the design, the rollout, the enablement? And you really kind of see, how do they take those inputs from our experience for this role, combine it with their experience of doing this type of uh, execution in past roles, and then how they combine those to deliver. Here's how I would approach this at Stensul. And so the important thing there is understanding if they have the experience, what did they personally deliver? Like what was their impact on? And then you want to test for what things did you learn and pick up in this interview process about our company, about our market that you would do differently from how you did this before. And so that's a way to combine, what we were just talking about the screen of experience versus not doing things just the same thing on rinse and repeat, would be an example to test for that.
I love that. It's so thoughtful on that side.
Another
do you guys,
another thing that I really focus on in the interview process, as I mentioned, I sort of bookend myself. And so I'm doing that initial conversation to determine high level fit. And then, we would kick off the rest of the process. I'm back in for the presentation stage. And then we've all read at Stensul, the hiring managers have read this book called Who. You may be familiar with it. But it's a whole book about hiring and a methodology there. And one of the things that they focus on is this step of the process called a top grade. And it's a really deep dive into all of their past roles. And you sort of start from the very beginning and you learn chronologically, why did they take that role? What were they looking for? What were they responsible for? What did they do well? What did they not do well? Who did they report to? Who are their peers? Why did they decide to leave? Why did they decide to take the next thing? And so you get this really full picture that I think a lot of people think is done, maybe earlier in the process in a recruiter screen or somewhere. But as a hiring manager, especially with an executive, you often skip a lot of that history. And so this is a way to make sure you don't skip all the history and you take all the learnings you can from their various experiences and really learn more about the why and what they delivered in the roles. And you can build this fuller picture of them as an individual, them as an executive, them as a kind of candidate in your process. It can be quite intimidating as a hiring manager to do this for the first time. Like, this is going to ruin the candidate experience. They won't stand up. Who wants to do an hour and a half resume review at the end of the process? Like, I've heard a lot of things here and felt and experienced a lot of the pushback. But once you do it and sort of jump in and execute this way and you get to the other end, you realize, oh my God, like I missed so much. I would have missed so much stuff on this candidate. And now I feel so much more confident to either hire them or a reason to pass.
Or the third one, maybe like there's something in there that I've been able to get red flag and I want to confirm on a reference or something like that, which is
exactly right. And that's another key part of this process is you are identifying, you are taking control of the reference process here as the hiring manager. Because what typically happens, hey, we're ready to make an offer, give me 2 references. And they always have 2 references that are going to speak highly of them. Now, there is an art to peel back the onion and ask questions behind the question, even for those self-selected references. But the top grade process gives you a lot more detail and ability to go ask for specific ones. We probably do more references than the average company, even for more junior roles, but especially for executive hires. And so part of what I'm finding is, all right, you're at this place. Who did you report to? Who are your peers? Who are your direct reports? And you're asking questions about your relationship with them from their point of view. But you're also getting their intel, but you're getting the names and the scope of the role and the reporting structure and everything else. So when it comes reference time, hey, you mentioned you reported to Andy while at this place. That's someone I'd like to have as a reference. And you're able to then speak to Andy as a reference with a lot more detail. Hey, I was actually talking to them about their time with you. They said that you rated them really highly on ability to collaborate. They said the number one piece of feedback that you gave them was on attention to detail. Can you talk to me more about that? Mm-hmm. So you have more specifics going into that reference conversation versus just sort of meandering and letting the reference sort of take control of what they're describing the candidate and what they remember from working on their team.
I love that. By the way, I never ever outsource the references to anybody but myself, right? Like as the hiring manager, it's like I end up becoming friends with some of those people. You learn. It's like
100%.
generally for me, I find like 75% of the time, it's like the references are where I'm like, oh my God, I either need to hire this person or I've had something confirmed that probably better like take a step back. And yeah,
I think it's a very underrated part of the process and underutilized. So I just think a lot of people don't know how to approach it and get the most value, or they convince themselves before the reference stage that I have to hire this person. This is a need. I can't have this seat empty. Let's go, go, go. Let's get an offer out. And then it's an afterthought because they've already convinced themselves they want to hire. And then the references become confirmation bias. And so the more you can control your emotions, your attachment until the process is complete. Now, that doesn't mean you don't sell yourself or the company to the candidate. You have to go all in if you have a feeling that you found the right person. But you still need to let this process play out. And I think showing, hey, we're investing in this time because we believe you're going to be a huge value as an executive of this company and be with us for the very long term. You can sell the process of being longer, more in depth, whatever the window is, as long as it's aligned to their goals. Hey, are you looking for something that's for the next 5 years? You hear a lot of people talk about, I want my next home. I want to be with the long term. Then cool. This isn't going to be a two-step process here. We're going to find out from each other, is this a really good match or not?
I think candidates I think they should welcome deeper diligence. I think as long as the processes are communicative and you know where you're at in the process and they're open and honest, I think if I'm a candidate, I welcome as long a process as I need. Right? It's like when you're kind of being slow played, that's when or knowing that those are the ones that are just brutal for sure.
Oh, you're exactly right. Oh, we didn't talk about this before, but we want to add this other step. We want you to talk to this person. That stuff can be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you talked about with references. One thing I do is I write a lot and publish on LinkedIn of like how I manage, how I invest in you, what is director level, all of these, like how I onboard a new employee. I find it helps people understand me as a hiring manager. B, it also like they understand me as a hiring manager, right? And so they're gonna know if they want to work for me or not. And I think I found a lot of that I think helps with my employer brand. Like I got a lot of people in when I was my last role, really like, I want to work with you. I've read all your stuff. Like, do you do it? Clearly, like being on this podcast is one piece of that, just explaining like, hey, I'm really thoughtful around hiring, but do you do anything that helps either the Stensul brand or your brand is like somebody they would want to work for?
Yeah, I think it's the main motivation around posting regularly on LinkedIn. And I do come at it from an angle of what's more the human side. And so I post a lot about, how do I think about career opportunities and making those choices and what the criteria would be to look, to identify a good company and a good team or a great company and a great team to go work for. And, the more I've definitely seen the anecdotal feedback of the more present I am out there on LinkedIn or social media or podcasts or whatever it may be, the more that sort of comes up in our hiring funnel. Like, oh, actually, I heard about Stensul from this. And I think the initial thinking is it helps the personal brand or helps the company brand from a business and growth perspective. But the number one impact I've seen from my effort there is the hiring and the visibility for future candidates.
I use that as well too. It feels really good too when a candidate does that research. There's a subtle thing too. If you write it,
yeah,
and they don't read it, that may be a sign that they're not detail oriented or something like that. And then when they do read it and be like, "Hey Tim, I love how you did that thing," it's like you're like, "Oh wow, okay." It feels good. It feels kind of like ego wise good as well too.
Well, it's like validating that it was time well spent.
Yeah.
And then to your point, like, oh, they've done some research. This is like another way to see, what level of research they've done. And that certainly, it's a signal of something for sure to be paid attention to.
How about AI in these processes? So I was just thinking about it, like, say we do all this work, we articulate ourselves on LinkedIn and we do all that. And then somebody just runs a OpenAI deep research on everything we've ever written. Like, how do you, I mean, I guess I don't feel like in these exec roles we're ever going to see the thing where someone's literally using OpenAI to be in the interview, but I've heard stories of people like that. But like, do you have anywhere you've seen AI in the interview process at all?
I'm perfectly fine with somebody doing a ChatGPT way to do research to prep for my interview.
Yeah.
Because I would want them to do that as they're going to meet with a customer, but as a first step. And so just like in a customer situation, the publicly available information from scanning the 10K isn't going to be enough to be prepared to go into that meeting. And so what else have they done to be prepared to go into that meeting? Because, the customer is going to ask them and expect them to have a deeper conversation than what they could get from ChatGPT. So similar applies to the interview, right? If somebody name drops a thing that might seem like it was an easy research, I think a good thing to do is just ask a follow-up question, right? Like, oh, and it isn't just to test them of did they listen to the whole podcast or read the whole thing. It's more, what are you doing beyond checking a box to show that you did your research? And so it could be, well, what are your thoughts on that topic, or whatever the counter may be, to peel back the onion and see what their level of deeper thinking is, or if they have a point of view on the topic, or can they engage in that next level of detail of conversation. I think is maybe a good way to approach it.
One of my favorites is, I'm going to pick 3 topics. I'm going to give you a moment to think about them. You picked one, and we're going to go as deep as I want to go, right? So I've given them choice and agency in that process.
Yes.
So I had one guy one time, he picked what I would have acknowledged been the hardest of the 3 topics. And I told him right off the bat. And then I just proceeded to, and it was clear he knew he had no knowledge of the depth of that conversation. Yeah. Right. So I find that the second they give me a permission to go as deep as I want to go, then it becomes really fun. It's one.
That's a good one.
Yeah. It's like, if you're like, I'm going to name a topic and let's go deep, maybe they haven't fully bought in, but if they pick one, then they have no choice but to go deep. So that's kind of the subtle thing I've tweaked on that front.
Love that.
As we kind of wrap, like, A, if there's any other topics I should have asked, let me know. But B, like, once you hire somebody, how do you make sure they're successful? And have you ever had a scenario when they aren't, when you know that you made the wrong hire?
Yeah. Before we get to that, I think there's a couple of things that are worth mentioning. I mentioned, part of your job is to sell the role, sell the company, sell you as the hiring manager while you're doing your diligence. And I think something I've really learned and paid more attention to in the last few years is like stepping back and saying, like, what would I do to go all in on this candidate? And it doesn't mean you skip the rest of the steps, but like to make sure they really wanted this role, what would I do? And I brainstorm and write down a few things. And it's resulted in some things that are just like stepping out of your day-to-day routine to kind of really engage in a different way and show up in a different way that's going to differentiate yourself from others in the process. I remember I was hiring for a VP of sales. A woman I was speaking with was based in Philadelphia. I was like, look, like, let's meet for lunch in Philly. So I moved all of my morning meeting outside of New York. I moved all my morning meetings to be phone calls instead of Zoom or whatever else. So took everything on the road. Doesn't take that, it takes a couple hours to drive to Philly. Had lunch, meaningful step in the process, face to face. I made the effort to go to her. Took all my meetings over the phone and drove back, and that was a good way to spend a Friday. Others, we were recruiting who's now our SVP of customer success, who is based in Colorado. Initially came on as a consultant for a project. And then, we're making a change at that role and decided to, hey, this person's actually demonstrated a lot of value as a consultant. What could it look like as a full-time role? But we need that in New York. And brought this person out for part of the consulting engagement to spend time in New York, got time with the team, went to dinner, and just started planting the seeds of like, hey, like, sounds like you're really happy in Colorado. Like, things are well out there, but you ever thought about moving elsewhere? And, what do you think of New York? And, oh, actually, like, my youngest is graduating from high school. One of their top schools is UConn. My sister lives in New York. So I'm thinking about these, and you just plant the seeds, but then you make these personal connections in a way that sets up to be, if they're going to make a decision, that you're the number one choice. Our current VP of sales, when came through a third door connection that you mentioned earlier in the chat, we were talking about next steps, and we had a recruiter for this one too. And I was talking to the, I was like, I really think this guy's a really good fit in a bunch of ways. I'm curious to see how he is with the team. We're doing this team event tonight. It's going to be karaoke. Like, we're kind of midway through the process, but if he's busy, no worries, or doesn't want to attend, but why don't you see if he wants to join? I think that could be interesting to see like which way it goes one way or another. And he decided to come. And the way he showed up was like really ideal for what you're looking for. Didn't jump in to be the center of the attention. Wasn't a wallflower either. Like, didn't just sit in the corner and watch everybody else do their thing. Engaged with the team. Did one song. Picked a really talented singer, our office manager at the time, to duet a song. Really positive move. Really smart move. And so just, I think thinking outside of the box around like, what does going all in look like? What is differentiating yourself as an executive, as a hiring manager, as a team, as a company look like, is something I've really leaned into over the last few years. And I think that gives me an upper hand in the hottest of hiring markets too. And that top 10% is really hard to find.
I think so. I mean, I also think you've been at Stensul for 6+ years, right? Like that having a CRO that's not 6 months in or 9 months in is, and the stability, especially in a market like this, is also very attractive as well too.
100%. And then I think the other way that we try to stand out is in the actual offer process. So we will construct an offer presentation. And we used to only do these for really senior roles. We now kind of do a version for not all roles, but a lot of them, where we take, here's what we're looking for the candidate, why we need this role, why the company is on the right trajectory, and here's why we believe you are the person. Here's what we heard from our team on the interview team. Here's what your references had to say about you as it pertains to the criteria or the outcomes or the scorecard. And we really make it a big event. Oftentimes there's a few different people that were on the interview team in there. And we, present that material and present the offer. It's kind of like a sales, if you're in a sales motion, you don't just have a call where you're sharing the proposal. It's an executive summary. It's like, hey, here's what we've heard so far. Here's why we think we're a great fit. Here's the business case behind it. Here's our investment summary. So that same approach of a sales process and what you do in a proposal call, how do we bring that to the recruiting process? We found that to be really meaningful, differentiating, and successful.
I love that. Yeah, it's so many people are, there's that awkward time and they've been working, trying to figure it out, going through the emotional side, and then to have somebody kind of welcome them in is really nice as well too. I like that. That's cool. Once you've hired somebody, how do you make them successful?
That's a great question. I think I'm always, that's what I'm still learning a lot of too. I think that's just a hard part of the job, because especially with leaders, they need to insert themselves and just start running the thing from day one. And you can get just caught up in, like, your plate is immediately full, right? And it can become hard to like step back and really assist them through the onboarding process. And how do you download the institutional knowledge? How do you point them to the right resources? But I think working with them on constructing their own plan and holding them accountable. So a lot of people will say, all right, create a 90-day plan, create a 100-day plan, whatever that looks like. And it sits on a shelf. And so whatever your methodology is there, I don't think it matters which thing that you pick, 30, 60, 90, or like, no, that's outdated, do it this way. Whatever it is, be consistent and have accountability. So part of your weekly one-on-ones is like, hey, let's pull that back up. What did we learn? What did we accomplish? Where are we here? And that should absolutely be related back to the scorecard and the outcomes that you're looking for them to achieve. Two, I think we often, for leaders, we skip steps that we would hold everybody else in the team accountable to. So if I'm hiring a sales leader, I want them to know the product. I want them to be demo certified. And maybe they have some really great feedback into how we do that today and want to make that better. Great. But go learn how we do it today and why we do it that way, and become really good at understanding our product, being able to speak to the value. If I'm hiring a CS leader, I also want them to know the product. I also want them to be able to deliver a QBR. So whatever the things that you hold the individual contributors accountable to, I really want the executives to get up to speed there too. And it keeps them from sitting back and being somebody that manages through dashboards, right? And so like one of those little things, you can get them into the weeds. That's going to look different at different stage of the companies, but that'd be a piece of advice.
I like that one. There's a tendency to be like, oh, I'll learn it later, but rolling sleeves up early is good. The other one I love is in my old COO, Carter did this, which I thought was just excellent. He's like, we're going to have a one-on-one every afternoon at 4:30. And for the first 2 weeks, and you're going to bring your questions and your observations. And so I run that with every hire I have as a direct hire now. And it's like, by the end of those 2 weeks, and you can't fake it at the end of those 2 weeks, right? Like you're either like, yeah, I've got somebody great who can manage up to me and is vibing with me, and I can tap them back on the right areas, and I can push them hard, or not, right? And it's like, and so like I often will make calls at the end of that 2 weeks on people.
Yeah, I love that. I just wrote that down.
Yeah. Well, this is amazing. I really appreciate the time. I learned a lot. I'd say you're one of the most thoughtful around like upfront calibration and what you're looking for. I think a lot of people kind of wing it, but I really am impressed at how thoughtful you are. And, the fact that you've been there for 6 years and are still killing it is a testament to what you guys are building.
Hey, thank you. This was a really enjoyable conversation. I learned a lot from hearing you and your approach too. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you, my man. I'll stop here.